perspective is what gives you the ability to look at things in a different way. So if I wake up and I'm grateful and I'm positive for just that simple fact, all of a sudden things start moving in the right direction for me in what I need to do for that day. And that's staying in humility. Because if I let ego come in the way and I let other things start taking that humility away, that's when I start faltering, right? That's when I start losing track of everything that I've built over time, right? And that part of it is very important for me. I think if I stay grounded, if I can put one foot in front of the next every single day, whenever there's a problem, I can assert and I can look at it and I can say, okay, what do we need to do to figure? Everything has a solution. How do we go about doing it, right? And that's humility in nature.
To the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast, the ultimate destination for accredited investors and entrepreneurs seeking alternative wealth building strategies. Discover how to fast track your journey to wealth and time freedom by thinking outside the box. If you're ready to join the ranks of the Contrarian Capitalists and learn the most effective ways to reach your financial goals faster, you're in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast.
Thank you once again for listening to another episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast. I'm your host and your favorite Silverback Sylvania Harrod. And on today's episode, I want to bring to you somebody that I believe is going to bring so much value to you. And as always, I like to let them introduce themselves, but I'm giving you a couple quick nuggets about this guy so far. He's the first person I've ever interviewed that had the sign dad above his head. So immediately I knew we're going to get along because anybody knows my background. It's all designed by my kids. So they come in, they put any kind of crap they want up there, and I have no idea what's really going to be there. And I like to consider myself a dad first and then everything else secondary. Well, and it depends on if my wife's listening. So we're going to say husband first, then I'm a dad because I don't want to get put in the doghouse. But for the most part, that was the coolest thing I'd seen. But Jimmy, go ahead and introduce yourself, my friend.
How are you doing? So thank you very much for having me on. My name is Jimmy Rios. I am the founder, president, owner of Rios Business Advisors and Rios Business Funding. I pride myself in being a father. Yes, number one. Obviously, couldn't be doing anything without the power of God and everything He's supplied in my life. And I love being on this forum because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a go-getter. I've worked really hard to build a brand. You see the R back there. That's my logo, Rios Business Advisors, Rios Business Funding, Rios Financial Group. These are companies that I built over 25 years in the trenches, I call it, right? Yeah. Really, anytime I talk about doing anything, it's because I'm empathetic to the need because I've been there, I've done it, and I'm talking about the good, bad, and the ugly, right? In every sense of the word. I wrote a book called Decoding the Mystery of Business Credit. It's on Amazon, where I help individuals bridge over to the business side of the world of credit and how to leverage properly. And we built a trademarked program that's amazing. It's called the Eye Level to High Level, and it's trademarked. It's one of its kind. I call it being in the blue sky because nobody is doing it the way we're doing it, taking some tools that are already out there, but nobody crossed them together to do what we're doing. And we'll talk more about that. I'm here to be a pathway, a guide, and a mentor to other entrepreneurs, investors, and whatnot that want to live and get to a better stage in life. One of my companies is called Next Level Credit. We take you to the next level, right? Step by step by doing things that I've done that have worked, right? So when you do things in a step-by-step process, it's because there's a methodology behind why that system works, right? And it's not just Jimmy Rios, it's a multitude of people that I've studied and learned from over 20 years of my own tutelage and mistakes and errors and blah, blah, blah. But that's how you learn is taking note, being very humble in the process, right? Because I've had a lot and I've lost a lot, right? And when you learn the power of humility in nature and what it can do for you, it'll elevate you and put you at a whole nother echelon of life. And that's what it's about.
Yeah, I think so. You'll notice towards the end of the podcast, I always tell people stay hungry, stay humble, stay grateful. I want you to double click more on what humility, like what your definition of humility is and how it's applied to your life and what you see for your clients too.
Oh, 100%, man. Definition of humility for me is knowing where you stand and being grounded in what you have so that you're grateful for everything around you at that moment, right? Not looking back, not looking forward, because, those are things you can't control. But what you can control is the now, the here and now, and what's around. So every morning, in being able to just open your eyes, it's a blessing, right? And I talk about perspective in so many ways in my journey, right? Because perspective is what gives you the ability to look at things in a different way. So if I wake up and I'm grateful and I'm positive for just that simple fact, all of a sudden things start moving in the right direction for me in what I need to do for that day. And that's staying in humility. Because if I let ego come in the way and I let other things start taking that humility away, that's when I start faltering, right? That's when I start losing track of everything that I've built over time, right? And that part of it is very important for me. I think if I stay grounded, if I can put one foot in front of the next every single day, whenever there's a problem, I can assert and I can look at it and I can say, okay, what do we need to do to figure? Everything has a solution. How do we go about doing it, right? And that's humility in nature.
You know what I love about your definition of what you were just to determine is like the present is the present, like being in this moment and like being real with what's there and understanding that it's just so I remember, so I'm getting to the 1-year anniversary of when I officially left corporate, not mentally, because mentally it was way before then, but like when I officially was like, boop, boop, and email gets cut off and hitting that moment, that actual anniversary date is tomorrow. So like, I want people to just wish me happy birthday. And it's kind of funny. Like my birth date is June 28th, everybody, not in real life, but like in real life. And I think it was that moment where I remember sitting there and going to myself and realizing, you know what, this journey is amazing. Like somebody asked me, because I talked to fellow colleagues at different points of time and they asked me, they're like, what's it like? What's it been like now you're getting to this moment? And I said, it was better than I could have ever imagined because I'm still working the same amount of hours. Yeah. I'm still handling the same level of stress, but the difference is the name at the end of the equation is the thing that is growing itself. Because my family's opportunities, the conversations we're having, the decisions we're making are fundamentally different than anything that happened before. And so I'm like, the conversations I was having before of like, where are we going for the summer and what are we doing for beach has transitioned to like, okay, we need to set up a trust. And based upon this trust, now we're at a place where we need to determine what things we're going to have to do and the way even from parenting, I look at, because working with people like high net worth individuals in general, you go and you're like, do you realize by the time the third generation comes around, the amount of cash that was inside the trust is less than what the first initial one was? Because that second and third generation person doesn't understand what it took to get that first generation problem solved.
Correct.
And it amazed me when I found out that data and go through it. And I'm like, okay, what really matters when the world is changing and things are transitioning? What is the actual gift I can give to my children? It's beautiful. In the present. It's like, hey, recognize who you are. Recognize what you care about, because you may not like what daddy does. You don't have to do what I do. All you got to do is show up and do, because your gift may be different. God gave you a gift. Just understand that gift and let that be expressed everywhere you go.
You made some great points. I got three kids of my own and my stepdaughter, and my twins are 16. My daughter is 19, and my stepdaughter is 31. Right? Give you context. I'm 49. Right? Yeah. So these kids are now. See, I remember when I was 16. Right? It doesn't feel like it was that long ago. Right? Yeah. And so now when I have these conversations with them, they see me on YouTube and social media, right? Yeah. They're seeing what I'm doing. And I tell them, listen, this legacy that we're building, we are building, right? And I say we because you guys are a very intricate part of everything that I'm doing, right? So I want you to be observers, understand, listen, right? There's nuggets of information that they don't teach you in school. You won't even get it in college.
Nope.
Learning from what I'm teaching you from my mistakes over the last 25 years. If my dad, who was not as vocal as I was, had taken the time to do that, how much further would I have been in my IQ of life, right? Because there's things I learned in books, and there's degrees that I got and certificates. Put all that aside. I'm talking about life lessons that they're going to take when they become fathers, 30 years, 20 years, whatever, and understand the basics, right? So I didn't just overnight become a success. This came over many trials and tribulations and many failures, probably more failures than wins, right? But the consistency pattern of getting back up, of counting your blessings and saying, let's go, that part is one of the things that I keep telling them. Look, I don't care because one of my kids wants to try out for soccer and he doesn't think he's good enough. And I said, listen, I don't care what you go out there and you give it your all. And that experience is what you need, right? Yeah. Even if you fail, Michael Jordan didn't make the varsity group, right? When he first came out, and where he ended up because of grit, because of consistency, right? Yes. So I'm trying to teach them is not to quit prejudging yourself in that sense. Don't underwrite yourself. Let's work through what we got, our skills, talents, and our grit, and let's make it happen and get the experience, which is something that later on, if you didn't try out, you would kick yourself in the butt because you said, I wish I could have, I wish I would have, but I didn't because I was scared, right? Let's start thinking differently. And that's where the mentality becomes a very big, crucial part of everything. And we take that into talking to W-2 employees who are thinking of maybe becoming entrepreneurs or sitting on the fence, and like all these questions that they ask themselves in their head is no different than my son saying, should I try out for that team? Am I going to be good enough? Right? Yeah. All these questions that you ask yourself, right? We do it ourselves. It doesn't matter if you're 16 or if you're 49.
Yeah. It's so true. I was doing an episode the other day where I was talking to people, and I was expressing to them about there comes this point in time where you have to make a choice. And then once you make the choice, actually what ends up happening 90 to 120 days afterwards is all you do is you just reveal who you really are inside. All those creepy crawlies are going to pop up. Just like your son was going through the experience of like, am I going to be good enough? Am I going to go do those things? It doesn't change as you get older. You just get more used to it. And so as you're going through, you're like, okay, is this the right thing to do? Do I have to go through this process? Because you have
so many times we're up against that. Yeah.
Yeah. You could just go through it. And it amazed me because I remember I had this one mentor one time. I told him, I think I was 20. This is before kids. So, this is before like me and my wife had kids. I had a kid when I was in my early 20s. But I want to say it's probably 26, 27. It's funny. I looked at data and it showed the ages of 38 to 42. It's for men. Is typically when they make that choice, whether they're going to stay on their current track or they're going to look for something different, because now you have almost 20 years of experience of doing some type of item. So now you're shifting to the part of life where you want to do things because you know you can't sustain the pace that you could in your 20s and 30s. So you look for more efficiency in life.
Yes.
Because you're like, I don't want to be sitting here grinding working 20 hours a day and doing that.
At some point it clicks. You make that connection at some point. Yeah. It takes some longer than others. Yeah. And there's a lot of trial and error in getting to that point. Yeah. But making the realization and the connection that there is a better way. And that is tough. That's very hard for a lot of people to make that connection.
Yeah. And that connection point is when it hits. And then as it hits, I remember talking to this guy. He was CEO of multiple companies. And I told him, I was like, I want to be a CEO of a large company. He's like, why in the world would you want to do that? And I go, because that's all I know. Right. And he tells me, he's like, I'm going to tell you you can, but let me give you some of the other options. And those other options is what helped me realize I didn't want to be CEO of a Fortune 1000 company. I actually wanted to be in private equity. And then being in private equity gave me a different level of opportunity. I got the same compensation because I thought CEOs get paid this without having to think about managing 1,000 employees and what their livelihoods and what their families are doing. And I go, okay, that makes sense. So I look at that space and I remember that moment of like somebody sharing that piece of wisdom. And the key thing I want to ask you is that, like, through your different journeys, what are some of the defining moments or things you can remember that like it just clicked for you in that moment and you're like, oh, this actually is a different path than what I thought it was going to be?
So when we look at my trajectory, and I look at my trajectory in like different phases, right? Yes. I call it the learning phase, the dark phase, and the enlightenment phase of my journey. And I'm talking about from my early 20s to 49, right? Mm-hmm. In these 3 20s, 30s, 40s, right? Yes. In these 3 decades. The thing that clicked for me, I was always an entrepreneur at heart, right? But I could never make that quick move off because I hadn't built a system that could give me that security that I thought I needed, right? But but the part of that system was here, right? Too, because I didn't have the knowledge in understanding how money really worked to be able to make money work for me so that I wouldn't be in that grind, having to work, thinking I need the next job. I need the next CEO job. I need the next zero, right? I needed to find a way to make my own zeros, right? Yes. So that it wasn't just a limiting factor of 100,000, because we know 100,000 next year is going to be 150,000. The next year is going to be 200. And I'm always going to be chasing my tail, trying to get to the next job that's going to meet that demand until you can't get that job. Then what do you do, right? So my mind shift was twofold. One was in understanding structurization in how money works so that I could put money to work for me, right? So that way I'm making money when I'm not doing a physical job inside of my business, right? And that was very huge. Second was being able to wholeheartedly devote 100% of my time to my endeavors in my business, right? Where before I was, serving 2 masters because, part of it was because I could, right? Because I could be in my home office working, doing underwriting or whatever I was doing for corporate. And I was running a team that was helping me build my business. But at some point I said, if I'm giving 40 hours over here to this job, right? How much more can I give to my own company in productivity and efficiencies, in knowledge, if I devoted those 40 hours to the company, right? And when I made that transition, my company grew 660%, right? So it was a huge change because not only did I feel free in the sense that I could spread my wings in the way that I wanted to. There is no limitations. But I honestly, I probably worked more hours, to be honest with you, because now I was all in, right? But there's a liberating effect to that. And I can't, now that in hindsight, I think it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And when I told my wife, she was like, what? You're going to give up this X amount for an unknown? And I said, well, I believe so much in myself, in my product and what I do, that yes, I believe it's worth exponentially more than what I'm making right now. Without knowing, I said, I can guarantee you that in a year, we're going to be 10 times better than we are now. And I put that on the board and I said, 10X, right? The old Grant Cardone, moniker. And I believed it. I believed it. And we increased it by 660%. So it can be done, right? It's just, you got to believe in yourself. And you got to wholeheartedly know where you stand and run with it. I mean, there's processes to do it and to do it right. And I didn't do it right in many parts of those 3 decades to get to where I was. It wasn't until it finally clicked that I made that connection where I felt grounded, humble, and ready to make that move that I did it. So there is a methodology or a method to the madness before I say, jump off the cliff. I'm going to make sure that you have your parachute and you have all your gear on, and you're going to do it right. The Rios Business Advisors, we advise many times because of how it went for us and what's worked in our world. And we don't suggest to just jump off the cliff on account of jumping off the cliff. It's very grounded,
Yeah, I understand that. I know prior to the recording, we were just sharing some of our own different war stories. And for myself, I had spent 8 years of building something, and before that was 8 years to find a thing that actually worked. So it was like 8 years that business was actually working, but probably the 10 years before then I was searching for something. So it was just like I was going to get something. I started just like everybody else does, and like network marketing. I'm going to do this and create this opportunity and go through stuff. And learn that was the best personal development organization you could ever be part of. That's all it really is. Like if you want to get great personal development, you hang out there. But the reality is, if you ain't in that
I think many of us that have gone through the stages, right, have gone through a similar route, because I the same. I went through that phase, and I got a very good library of books and learned a lot. But ultimately, it changes the journey over time. And you have to reflect and be able to understand that, Like, I love when I read about some of these 20-year-olds that are making it, like, just super millionaires, and I applaud them for that. But there's something to be said about the journey, too, that, they don't get, right? Because, as like I tell my kids, I said, every generation is going to get diluted by what our parents did, right? My parents' journey was different than mine, and they had to go through a lot more struggles, right, to get to where. But there was something about that journey that I picked up on as I was studying my dad's transition over the same time frames, because my dad had children at the same age I did. So when I see my kids at a certain age, I can remember where I was at with my dad, and I put myself back to his stage. It's like, how did he do it versus what am I doing? And then this applies to parenting. This applies to my marriage. A lot of the parallels, right? To better our legacy and our generations, we need to kind of checkpoint ourselves and say, okay, wait, pause. Let's look back. Let's reflect. What can we do better? How can we do better for our kids, right? Let's not give them everything. Let's learn to instill these other things that maybe they don't know about. And it's not their fault, because nobody gives them a book when they're born and says, read this and understand it. You got to learn through the mistakes and through, the grit and all these things that go on in the world, right? We don't need them to be perfect either. Whatever choice they make, that's what God gives us, is that free will, right? So we got to let them open their wings and fly and fall and do these things. But you can be a good guide, right? That gives us a guide, in the form of his word to be able to follow or not, right? And you choose. At some point, you're going to fail and you're going to figure it out, right? You're going to ask for help. So I look at things in a very similar journey. I was like, look, I can't be the solution for everybody, but through reciprocity, if I can share in my knowledge and being able to help others, that love that comes from seeing the effect will pay dividends over time, not only for the companies that are growing, but for the testimonials and for the ability for them to say, hey, you know what? Go talk to Jimmy. He helped me at this crucial time in my development, right? Whether they did or didn't do some of the things is inconsequential. The idea is that the seed was planted at some point in their trajectory to work with me. And my motto is, we're your partner in progress, right? What does that mean? Well, having a partner is a lifelong process, right? It's not just selling a unit or a service one time and buy. That's how it was in the old days. Now I'm more about being an asset to that company over time, right? That's why I work on contingency. So when you get paid, I get paid, right? And it works this way because they feel that I'm a vested partner in their efforts and what gets done, right? I can't control everything, but what I can control is going to be reflective. And is like we're parallel. We're coming up together. And that's a good thing, right? I want people to understand that there's going to be mistakes and there's going to be failures, but there's also solutions. And we're always looking. I liked at the beginning of your intro and your podcast about breaking down the box.
Yes.
Thinking outside the box. And that's one of the things that I talk about all the time. I said, there's no boxes where we work. This is a mentality that most people put boxes around everything in underwriting, in banking, and investment. They're like, if you don't follow these guidelines, we can't do it. And I said, no, yes, you can. That's how we built the eye-level to high-level program, was because we thought outside the box. If we would have stayed in the paradigm of we can only do this, then we would still be just the same thing every day. And that doesn't work for me. It's against my DNA,
Yeah, I fundamentally understand. It's like, if you're contrarian by nature, there's certain like desires that are there that you try to quell and you try to like silence and be like, okay, you go through and I'm going to stay here. But at the same time, you have these other desires. So like, I know most of the people that are listening to this episode are at a place where they go like, okay, I know you've made the move. I potentially want to make the move. How does understanding, because this is a topic I've never really heard talked about before. What is business credit and how does it actually work? And what are some of the benefits of it?
Oh man, that's such a great question. It's the ethos of what helped me write the book on decoding the mystery of business credit. Why? Because in everything that we know, right, it's all personal credit, right?
Yes.
We put the biggest liability on ourselves in trying to grow a business when we go and bootstrap ourselves and we borrow from our credit, right? And then something happens like a pandemic or tariffs or whatever, out of your control, right? And what happens? All your credit is shot. Now you just used up your leverage in whatever way you thought was possible because you didn't know otherwise. You didn't know there was a better way. Now, with business credit, one, you take away that liability on yourself as a person. You built your limited liability company for a reason. Why don't you put that liability on the company and have the company build its legs and start running with its own credit? With personal credit, I'm only allotted really about 30% of that credit, right? If I want to keep my credit standing where it's at, this illusion, this gold trophy in the corner, that is that 750 credit plus whatever, then I need to only spend 30%. Well, that's not a lot. You don't have that much to play with. And so when push comes to shove and you're using personal credit, you're really doing yourself a disservice because inside of a month, your credit's going to go like this. And what will happen is that banks will start cutting your lines of credit based on that number over time, right? They see you as a risk when they do their auditing and they see that your scores went down. So all of a sudden, you had a $50,000 line of credit that just got cut to $10,000. So you can't do much, right? With a business, you can go 100 times. You can go to 100% of that limit, right? And it doesn't affect you personally, right? Because it's not reflective of the scoring model. It's not reflective off of the amount you use. In business, you're used to using leverage to be able to buy materials, do payroll, whatever, while you got receivables coming. So there's ebbs and flows, and that's why it's meant to be used in the way that it is. Also, with business credit, you can get 10 times more than you would if you had been approved, let's say, for 10,000 on a personal credit. You can get 100,000 with business credit, properly leveraged and properly structured. And when I say that is because presentation in getting business credit is more than what anybody understands. Everybody has the misconception or the myth that you need to have certain things to get business credit. Well, they're looked at. But I always say, if you know the rules of the game, you're going to win, right? So if I have a book that tells me how to do things and I go and I present to the institution, bank, whatever you want to call it, for a line of credit in business, it can go as simple as the industry that you're in, right? It could go as, if you have the wrong NAICS code, it will blow you out of the water, right? People don't realize that. Now you can still have a business that is in that realm, in that industry, but you don't have to get the loan under that industry. You can set up a whole nother business with the proper NAICS code, right? So that it's going to go through underwriting a lot smoother, right? And then you can lend yourself money from your other corporation, right? Because you don't pay taxes on money that's borrowed, right?
Nope.
So you can lend yourself money all day long. All you're doing is just structuring yourself for success. We build corporations on paper that have Dun & Bradstreet, the EIN, the website, the phone number, all following the rules that I even put in my book. But what is the difference? I put a personal guarantor on it, and I'm able to get $500,000 of business credit already attached to that business. So when you go to purchase it, yeah, you're purchasing a business in a box, but it's giving you a lending entity, right? That's already set up. And all we're doing is just changing who's the owner of it. And now you have built something that would have taken somebody 2 to 5 years to do with financials and all the things. We've already done that work for you, right? So we basically injected steroids to make you compete in the Mr. Olympia, bodybuilding contest, right? Took you from a puny little guy to, right? And that's what we do with business is, look, you can do it your way, right? And that's fine. You're going to learn at some point, right? Or you can do it in the way that we've developed because we've already been through that, right? We already know underwriting wise, our institutions and everybody that we work with from private equity to on up, they've already done business with us. So our presentation is key because our default ratio is 0 because everything that we give them has been so solid, they don't have a problem putting the stamp of approval, right? And it is kind of old school in the sense that who you know and what you know will go further than traditionally speaking, putting in an application saying, well, I got a 750 score. That's not it, man. That's just one piece of the puzzle, right? So working smarter, not harder is what I tell people is like, listen, I'm not telling you can't do it your way. That's why I wrote a book. What happens when you buy a book? Most people keep it on the stand like you see behind me. They don't put it into action, right? It's putting it into action where you start seeing the results.
So it's interesting that you mentioned all that because that became a reality of life for me in general, especially working in private equity and going through that process it's definitely not about what you know. It's about how you like knowing the right people, knowing how to grease the right wheels, and presentation is key because it's kind of like baking a cake, man. If I go ahead and I add baking soda instead of baking powder, man, that thing's going to taste a whole lot different. Just an ingredient off or forgetting to put there, you're going to have flat chocolate chip cookies. Right. And so like, it's so funny looking at that process.
How many times, Sylvania, did you have somebody come to you and say, hey, I got this unicorn project and I want 100% financing and I don't have any money, but it's a great project. And I'm like, what? Like, okay.
Every day.
What's your presentation? Where are all your tools to sell me on this? You're just throwing your unicorn out like that and nothing to back it up. And like
literally every day. Right? Every day I go through conversations where a person's like, and they're so like I get the drive behind it, but I'm like, you got to understand rule number 1 in any type of communication, understand your audience. Understand your audience and what their desires are. As a human, as a soul, I love that you're passionate about it. Yep. But as a fiduciary, I am not putting anything in there because unfortunately, there are some boxes in life. You know, like there are some. There's some frameworks to go through, and I go like you got to think. So thinking traditional approach would be like, I have this great idea, and this opportunity is amazing. So everybody's going to be excited as I am on the opportunity, because there's a lot of people selling that idea. And then I'm going to tell you the contrarian approach is asking yourself the question, why would a person across the side of me care? What do they care about?
Exactly.
What are the things they like to invest in? What is their investor profile? And do I even match what they're looking for?
Exactly.
And if you understand what that person wants, then you will frame your presentation towards things that are going to matter to them, because you're asking them to take on a whole lot of risk for the possibility of an opportunity man, if I got paid in hopes and dreams,
Well,
richest man
and
in
let me
Babylon.
tell you, we're getting to that point where we're talking about having our own private equity, right? Through Rios and being able to lend our own money. And, that, so then, now you're sitting in a whole different chair, right? Because now you have, if we had people coming to you before as a broker, now as the owner of the funds, everybody, and I think this is where we have to think differently, right? We have to think like vested partners. We have to think, and people start realizing that it's not as easy, right, as they think, because everybody wants to just paint the picture that, throwing $100 million out there is no big deal. Hello, right? $1 million, 100,000, 50,000, right? I'm setting up financing in Medellin, Colombia right now for real estate. It's a whole different world in loss and risk mitigation in Latin American countries versus the U.S.
Totally
The
different.
concepts are the same. It's still real estate, but it's a whole different world, right? And where we're used to seeing 80%, 90% LTVs, over there, they're 50%. And the hard money lender won't lend, but maybe 30%, right? So you're coming in with 20, 30, 40%, 50% money cash to make anything work. Here, people are like, I got to put 5%? What do you mean? I got to put money? I'm like, I don't understand why the conversation became so difficult when you go to buy a house and the loan officer tells you got to come in with X amount, 3, 5, whatever percentage that is on your closing costs or on your down payment. It's not anything different. You're buying a $500,000 asset. You're going to have to come with skin in the game. Why is that? When did it become so different when all of a sudden you're trying to get 100 million or 200 million? Why do they think that you don't have to go through those steps? Hello, I'm not that kind of guy that is, I'm more diplomatic in what I say to people, but at the end of the day, my message is the same. It's like, listen, you put yourself in the position of this guy lending you the $100 million. Would you expose $100 million of your hard-earned money on a project that sounds good, but anybody can paint it? You can go on AI and paint a pretty picture, right? AI will paint you a 3D image of everything with your own voice if you wanted to. It's not going to guarantee you results. I need to find the protection for my investor or for the one giving the money, and that's what they don't understand. So we become very good at being that bridge and understanding the nuances that go between both worlds, because we have to put on the hat. We've been on this side in raising capital and trying to get funds and getting credit and looking for other ways, breaking down boxes to make our businesses succeed. That's what makes us different in our DNA. That's why we're able to do what we're doing, what we talk about. But at the same time, we got to put on the other hat and be empathetic to the other side of the equation, because that is, what makes capitalism work, right? The flow of capital inside of everything that we do. How do we do that?
Yeah, if I was going to take a nugget, because I'm thinking about the audience and they're sitting there and they're at the place where they're on the fence and they're hearing these terms, they're hearing these things. What I really want to surmise for them is that you need to be at a place where you're willing to hire the right mentors and put them in place. Get the proper advisors, get the proper people, because the thing that I'll say to you until I'm blue in the face, there's 3 people you need in life. One, the person that's ahead of you that can tell you how to avoid the potholes and speed bumps in life that you're going. 2, it's going to be the person sitting in the foxhole right next to you who's going through that experience, which is why I love community, because you're going to have a group of people that are there with you. And then the third person is the person that you're dragging from behind, because eventually you're going to get to a point where you have experience and you're going to want to share that wisdom back. And so through those phases of get a mentor, have a community, and then teach eventually to help the next generation go through that process is the key thing, because there are things you're not going to comprehend today. It's kind of like parenting. Like as a child, you go through and you're like, why are my parents being so mean? And why are they being so strict? And why are they going there? Then all of a sudden, as you become a parent of the children those age, you go and you go, damn, you think my parents knew I was lying the entire time? How was I so oblivious to that whole process as you're going through? And then You get a point where you're like, you start calling your parents. You're like, I'm sorry. I just want to say I'm sorry. Like, I can't imagine at your time frame the things you had to deal with and the level of shame and scrutinization you had to do from your colleagues because you didn't have personal cell phones. You had people had to call you over the walkie-talkie that everybody heard that your kid's school is on the line. You know, like those things. And so, like, looking at that, I think what people need to understand is that getting the right mentor, buying his book, understanding business credit versus personal credit will change the game for you. Because everything he described, he was literally talking about me. I'm the person that built a business that was structured on like cycling cash. And every single dollar, it was basically a resale business. So you'd buy, you get it. And I had all these beautiful points. But the problem happened is that like once things starting to like dip in different moments, as things are cyclically, I didn't have business credit to back me. Yeah. I didn't have it because I didn't even know it existed.
Exactly.
And so
you need to have that. When I built the I-level to high-level program, I built it around having a third arm that could be built. I only have 2 arms, but what if I could have a third arm that could do things for me while I'm doing things with my 2 arms? What effect would having a third arm do for me in the sense of having capital coming in to be able to do the things that I need so that when I go with this is when you meet with somebody, you advise them that they need systems, they need to purchase equipment, they need to hire people. What's the first thing happens is they put up this wall of objection because the simple conversation is, well, if I had the money, I would have done that a long time ago, right? Yeah. So I'm going to be very straight with you, and I'm going to say, look, I'm going to take down that barrier right now because I'm going to show you a way where I'm going to build this third arm of capital that's going to come your way, right? But difference is we're going to have a blueprint. And when you have a blueprint, you have a set of guidelines and steps to help you get those things that you need to get you to the next level. If I give you all this money and left you at your own device, studies and history have shown that because you don't have a pathway, you're going to go and spend it on the things that you think you need the most. But if you have a guide that lends their knowledge to helping you guide that money in the right channels to scale and to do the things you need to do properly, we can pinpoint month by month where the growth patterns are and what weaknesses are needed to be addressed first. So this money is distributed properly. But then you have the effect of debt service coverage, because if you have debt, you got to pay that debt off. So we built that arm to come in with capital as assets to pay off the liability, right? And that's where it becomes a game changer, because you use leverage as just a tool, right? You use it in sporadic moments so that money can make money, right? If I can leverage over here and get, let's say, a $500,000 line of credit at 0% interest for 18 to 24 months, and now I use a fraction of that money and I put that money to work where it's giving me a return to cover my expenses, to do a lot of the things that I was traditionally doing with my 2 hands. Now my 2 hands are doing what it needs to do to grow. My third arm is coming in as a sweeper and sweeping the debt, working on giving you more capital. Now we're utilizing structures inside of a trust, holdings companies, all the things that are needed inside of your business to keep growing, to elevate you, right? You pay yourself a salary. You got things moving in the right direction. Your credit is stellar. We're always able to borrow because our numbers are always in line. We're not over leveraged. We're following the balance guidelines because we're thinking through a third arm that's doing things that we didn't think were possible. But this is where the mind of another person comes in that is doing it through our program, high level to high level. And we call it the high level to high level because we took high level principles and we brought it to the high level, right? To the common Joes, where traditionally speaking, these concepts wouldn't be allowed to anybody that wasn't an accredited investor with millions of dollars in liquidity to even partake in, right? We've made it accessible to the common Joes listening, to those that are saying, well, Jimmy, I have a startup or I have an idea and I don't know where to get started. Well, let's talk about that and let's put this plan together. Or the ones that are in business, that have been in business 5-10 years, but are to the tilt in debt, right? Because they didn't know how to manage their processes. And now they're like tilting this way instead of staying straight or being able to go up. So we're going to look at those too. And this is one of those programs we do not discriminate. Everybody's welcome. Everybody has a story, and we're going to build that puzzle for every person individually. Some it could go quicker, some it could go slower. But if you don't do nothing, you're not going to do nothing. You're going to stay where you're at or go backwards.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. And I think that if I had to recap for us to land the plane for this discussion today, I would say for that individual that's sitting there, that's on the fence, they need to be at a place where they can understand that you got to use like unconventional wisdom, in order to see the opportunities that aren't there. And if you're sitting there on the fence about your 9 to 5 and what's going through, I valued joining programs that were going to educate me on that element of what you're talking about, which is the biggest difference I've noticed from those that are wealthy versus those that have a poor mindset is the wealthy understand how to maximize, like how to increase the ROI of their time. Right. Like, how can I have things working in place for me, even when I'm not, where they have a non-linear relationship with time. They're like, yes. Every day I want to get 100 hours of work out in 24 hours with me only using 2 hours of my actual time. Whereas the other way around is more of like, oh, I got this amount of hours. I'm going to work every single second I can possibly get. And you help them bridge that gap of gaining more leverage in their life. And what they're
you said it. We talk about compounding in so many different ways. Nobody ever talks about how do you compound your time and leverage your time in the best way, right? I mean, that's it. We have finite measures when it comes to time. It's the most valuable piece, and yet we don't use it in the way that it should because we don't trust people, we don't trust systems, and we want to try to do it all ourselves. Man, let go of that ego. You don't have to do everything yourself. The sooner that you can start trusting in others and work together, we're going to get more done. Trust me when I say more, because I got a team that everybody on that team, I learned the hard way that I couldn't do it all. And when I finally let go, my business blew through the roof because I finally was able to let it do what it needed to do, trusting on people's skill sets, minds. I mean, you got 2 eyes, another brain, 2 ears. Multiply that times X number of people to help you get to your goals. It's not you anymore. It's a team. And that's the beauty of working as a community inside of your business.
Exactly. Well, if people wanted to reach out to you and they wanted to get a hold of what you're doing, how can they get a hold of you, my friend?
Social media has become the de facto place to go, right? To get information, not only on our website, riosbusinessfunding.com, but our YouTube channel, at Rios Business Funding. Every time you comment, I get it. I get it right there. Rios Business Funding and YouTube at Rios Business Funding. All our social media pages at Rios Business Advisors is another one that we use. So just go through social media, look up Jimmy Rios and credit, and you're going to come up with my information. And listen, I'm one of those guys that I'm here on the ground, and when I see something, I have no problem picking up the phone and talking to you about it. It doesn't matter where you're at in the States. If you're listening, let's do business. Let's talk. Let's get you off the fence. You're worried about making these moves. I've made them. I've already done them. And let me tell you, there's going to be a right and a wrong way to do it. I'd rather have you maybe go a little slower and let's look at it so that you make a better decision so you can get there maybe more efficiently, better suited, and have more success.
Absolutely. So thank you once again for sharing your levels of wisdom with the audience, man. I've really enjoyed this discussion point. And so I'm just truly grateful for you sharing this time.
Awesome. It was great, man. Anytime you let me know, man, and I'm here. I love this discussion, and there's a lot of people that need to hear more about this stuff. Eventually we'll talk about legacy building and what we can do for our kids and how we can instill in them those nuggets that they need, not just for entrepreneurial sake. Not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. I'm talking about being able to have success in life, in marriage, in your health, and all these other factors that have nothing to do with money per se. There's other riches that we make that we have to build on. So, definitely.
No, I definitely enjoyed it. And so to all the listeners, as I always say, stay hungry, stay humble, and stay grateful. So enjoy your time. Thank you once again, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thank you.